Welcome back to Onshape Orientation. Today we're going to be talking about the parallel constraint. So like always, let's get started with a sketch on the top plane. Select that top plane, hold down Shift and S, letter P to hide those planes, and letter N to normalize our view. So if we take a look up here at the top, our constraints live from this bar all the way over to the search tools bar. We've talked about our coincident, our concentric. Today we're going to be talking about parallel. If we hover over parallel, you'll see that in parentheses, there's a lowercase letter b. Pressing letter B on the keyboard is going to toggle parallel, that parallel constraint on and off. And like it says, make two or more lines parallel. But we need to have some geometry to be able to make those lines parallel. So let's start by clicking the line tool or by pressing the letter L on the keyboard. We'll draw a line all over. Things you want to pay attention to. I've had some questions in the past, the last couple of weeks, about how does Onshape choose? I think it was when we were doing the midpoint line on my short video. Somebody commented, how do I know how this works? Or how do I make, what order does it pick from? Like, why is it moving the line that I drew and not this other line? I don't really have a perfect answer, but what it seems like to me is that it goes from left to right, from most constrained to least constrained. So if I draw these lines, here's one. We'll draw one that's over that way. We'll draw one that's over here. And we'll draw one over here. So we went 1, 2, 3, 4. If I want this line to be parallel with this line, I clicked this one first, but I clicked this one second. When I press B, it's going to turn that one because remember, I made this one first. So if I undo that, and I wanted this one to be parallel with this one and press the letter B, notice it still changes my number 4 line to match the angle of my number 1 line because this one was made first. From left to right, it's going from the left side of the screen is, oh, here's the line. Okay, match that line, right? I'll give you another example. If I undo it, I'll try it with this line and this line. And now that one's going to move to match this line, right? But if I were to click all 3 of these and press the letter B, you'll see now that that one moves because these two now have constraints added on them. So they're more defined than that first line that I drew, the left, or it's the most leftmost line. So this one you'll see has a perpendicular constraint and a parallel constraint. This one is 2 parallel constraints, and this one only has that 1 parallel constraint. If I were to do these again, and I were to select all of these and try that, it's going to break because it's trying to move things. But if I wanted this to now be parallel with this, it won't allow it because right now these are perpendicular with one another, okay? But if I were to draw geometry now, it doesn't matter where I draw it. And if I said this needs to now be parallel with this, it'll move and fall in place like it needs to be. So keep that in mind. I know sometimes you'll be doing something on Onshape and you'll rack your brain like, I know I'm doing this right. I figured if I clicked it first, this is how it would do it. And in some constraints, that's the way it works, but others just know that they're kind of finicky. Easy way to get around this, delete all these lines. Draw your lines first that are going to kind of be your anchor point. So right now I'm giving this off the origin and I'm going to draw out, we'll call it 10. That makes it a fully defined line with a vertical constraint. If I show those real quick, I have a horizontal constraint and a coincident constraint with that origin point being where it coincides. Now, if I draw any geometry, it doesn't matter where I do it. If I want it to be parallel to that line that I drew, since it's fully defined, it's going to click here and here, press the letter B. It's going to fall in line to match the one that is fully defined. Same thing here. If I click these two, they're going to fall in line and do what they need to. So pretty cool little tool. Why would I want to use this though? We just got done making a grill in my welding class, and it had a lot of slots that we needed to do. I could have used the linear pattern tool, and that is what we did. But to start, we kind of drew some lines. So I wanted a line, let's say that was 40 inches long. Okay. And I wanted a bunch of lines that all were about longer than that because I had to come through and had to trim them up. I could have came in and made things as a pattern, but what I needed to do was make all these parallel, right? I had some kids that were drawing some slots, and they drew one and they thought they were vertical. So let's say we'll make this guy vertical over here. And then their next one lined up with that, but instead of following that vertical, they were kind of about there. Sometimes, I don't know why, but my students end up using these arrow keys and getting kind of skewed. You can look at the view cube up at the top. They'll get kind of off a little bit, and they'll think, oh, that's just from moving those arrow keys. That's why my lines don't look straight. Well, I know that things need to line up. They need to be straight. They need to be parallel. And then they started offsetting things from each other. So I need this offset at 0.25, and it looks good, right? And I need an offset on that from about 4 inches, right? So they start planning all this stuff out. And then when we go to turn those into slots, it's a lot easier to see that some of these are not perfectly aligned. So when I go to select all of these, we'll renormalize our view. We'll go slot tools. I'll select all those, and we'll turn these into some bigger slots because I made this geometry pretty big. We'll turn them into 4-inch slots, right? As I do that, you can tell that my lines aren't perfectly straight. Now, if that's the design you're going for, that's one thing. But what I can do now, if I select these and say parallel, they'll all straighten up and they'll match exactly how I need them to be. So when I need slots to go down perfectly vertical, I need some grooves, or I just need basic geometry, right? Some things you can do. I'm drawing a rectangle using lines, right? Here's a quick polygon, 4 sides to a rectangle, but that we know that's not straight. So I know these two need to be parallel to one another, and these 2 sides need to be parallel to one another. So we got that there. Later on, we'll learn the other vertical and horizontal, but now I know these need to be horizontal, and by default, those have to be vertical. So I just added a bunch of constraints to this. The only thing that would make this fully defined is giving it some sort of dimension, but you're able to draw geometry in a way that you don't necessarily have to draw it perfectly the first time. You can come back and fix it with constraints. So that's kind of where the parallel tool comes in handy. To kind of clean up your geometry and clean up some shapes that you might have messed up a little bit, or it tracked to something else. It gets really hard when you're doing, like we do a lot of plasma signs, and there's a lot of splines, and every line you draw seems to end up wanting to touch or constrain itself to something else. And then you go to skew something and it skews your whole drawing. So these are ways you can lock things in and do it that way. So next week, we will be talking about the tangent tool, one of my favorite tools in Onshape. For a long time when I was in college, I was learning AutoCAD, and there was a tangent, like a way to do circles, and it was fairly simple. And one of these other programs I used to use was called PlasmaCam, and there wasn't a way to do the drawings we were doing on AutoCAD in this smaller PlasmaCam type drawing setting. And like basic, simple mounting plates and stuff with a cool sweeping curve, I wasn't able to do because we didn't have that tool right now. And it's probably one of the harder ones for my students to wrap their heads around. Just kind of show you something real quick. But we'll do stuff like this where we're drawing circles. We'll make these two equal each other. And then we'll come up here, draw a circle, and we'll make these guys all tangent one another. and then I come through and I trim out that top piece, right? So then if I were to throw some sort of mirror over that, I start getting some geometry that works really, really well to make like a mounting plate of sorts. So I'm able to do some stuff with tangency and can come in and clean these things up. I'm going to have a real quick mounting plate here in just a second. Actually, we'll use our parallel constraint. I'll get rid of that vertical line there. I'll tell this that it needs to be parallel. That guy real quick. Line this up here. Do a tangency command there. And you'll see I have a nice mounting plate. This is how I typically like to do plates with a little bit of weight reduction. I could put bolt holes right there. Not as much material being used. And it kind of cleans up the edges. So stay tuned next week for that tangent exercise. Like I said, tangents are where it's at. A lot of times people go in and think, oh, I'll just use a fillet tool to just round my corners. And you can get a lot done with tangent that you might not always be able to do. And I'll have some practice drawings available for that. One of the first drawings I give to the kids that uses this, like I said, they can't wrap their heads around how to get it. And I'll walk through how to do that step by step. I believe it's practice number 8 or 9 or something in my packet, if you guys have those packets. But I will show you guys how to do that next week. So again, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. I've been seeing a lot of those comments, and I have some of you guys that have been giving me some project ideas. I know somebody had asked for a pin. I found a couple at Lowe's. I'll be sending you an email back letting you know kind of if this is what you want me to do. But like I said, there's some project ideas that you guys are coming out with. If you want a full video on just how to do a specific type of project, again, let me know and keep on watching. I think we're doing some good things and hope you guys are learning a lot about Onshape. Thanks. Take care.